Hello folks, it's Tom Brown here from Fix It Now, and today we're going to talk about replacing tiles. This is very common when you put tile directly on a slab in the state of Texas. The soils here shift, and we often have cracked tiles. So I'm here in my hallway, and I've got a couple of cracked tiles which you can see on the floor here. And what we are going to do is we are going to take out the grout around these tiles and chip out the tiles, and we'll go through that process. And of course, before you engage in this process, you have to have some replacement tiles, and luckily I saved a half a dozen or so when we first put this tile in here, so that just in case this happened, we have replacements here for that. So let me explain a little bit about the process here. I have first taped around the area that I am going to work around, and you can see that I have 5 tiles here which we are going to work to get out. And the process that I have found the best to use is to use an oscillating tool here, and this is from Chicago Electric Harbor Freight, and there's a variety of other tools that are very similar from Dremel or Bosch and other tool vendors, but they have a very nice attachment here, which is a grout tile attachment that makes this job rather easy to do. I wouldn't say easy because there's a lot of dust that comes up when you are doing this process, and one of the things I would definitely recommend is that you use a mask with this process here as you dig up the grout. And another way to do this manually is with a little grout tool like this, or another grout tool like this, which you can get at your local toolbox shop. These are very, very difficult to get out your entire grout, so I certainly recommend the use of the oscillating tool. So what we will do, the process is to first tape around here to protect the outside edges of the tile, so I don't accidentally cut into those. And you can further tape some paper down on the outside edges to protect the tiles further if you do want to do that. So what we're going to do is we're going to use the oscillating tool, and we're going to cut the grout all the way around the outside perimeter of the area that we want to chip up. After we get that, and the reason is we want to isolate these tiles from the other tiles so that when we beat on this with the hammer and the chisel, we won't be digging up the rest of the tiles here as well. So we'll go through that step by step, but after we do get the grout out of the tiles here, and we're going to use a hammer and a chisel, and we're going to work on getting a piece of one of the tiles up and crack it out of the way, and then continue with the chisel to work on that and bring up the tile. It's a tedious process. You'll actually find once you get under one of these tiles, it's fairly easy to get the rest of the tiles out. Then it takes a while to get the underlying cement out of these underneath the tiles here, and we have to clean out that very, very well before we put on the new thinset cement and new tiles down. So let's get started on that, and we'll show you how the process goes here. Okay, see, as you can see, got to work it very, very slowly. Be careful not to go across the other side of this tape onto the good tiles, and just be patient. Let the tool do its thing, oscillate it, and work it back and forth until you get a pretty good cut on the grout. First thing you got to make sure that you have safety equipment on, and for this job I'm just using a pair of my cheater glasses here, which is good enough. The grout really is just a fine dust. So I've got my mask and safety glasses, and also headphones. You need headphones, and I use my Bose headphones to give me some attenuation of the loud noise that the oscillating tool makes. So make sure you wear those to save your hearing here. So one thing I want to point out, some tips on doing the removal of the grouting, is you see along here where our outline of our bad tiles here, and you can go along when you're removing the grout here. You can go along past the tape and make sure that on the long side here, and remove the grout there on these long lines. You can't do it on the crosswise pieces here because you could damage and hit the adjacent tiles here. So that's a good tip. Now the oscillating tool doesn't get all of the grout completely out of there, and that's where this little tool here comes in handy. You can stick that in the channels and grab some of the grout out like that, and that'll help remove more of it. So you know, it's hard to know exactly how much of the grout you've got to get, but again, you're trying to isolate each tile so that it's separate, so that when we go to chip it out, you're chipping out only the tile that is cracked and not the adjacent tiles. So okay, let's get all right, now we're on to the next phase. We have cleaned all of the grout out around our perimeter and the interior of the tiles that we want to remove. And maybe some of you are asking, how deep do you need to go in cleaning out the grout? Well, like I said, it all kind of depends upon how many extra tiles you have. If you don't have any extra tiles, you've got an exact match of number of tiles, then I would say you want to do as clean a possible job as you can, getting the grout and the thin set below that, because that'll give you the best chance of not interfering with the tile that's next door, the good tile. Okay, now chipping out the tile, there's two techniques that we're going to that I have used to do this before. One of them is you can take a drill with a brick or a mortar drill bit, and you can drill some holes in the some of the broken tile to give you a start as to where you are going to use your hammer and chisel. In this particular case, I have got a pretty good, right in the center here, I've got a pretty good tile that's cracked, and so I'm going to put my chisel right in there and try to chip this piece out here, right here. And so we'll go ahead and try that. Now, additionally here, I have surrounded the area with some paper down here and some towels, and put on some different safety glasses and some gloves. This, when we chip up the tile here, this gets very, very sharp shards that are going to come off of the tile and can easily cause cuts. So you got to be very careful in this case. We're going to get my little... Okay, now we got all the tiles up. They actually came out quite easy. It's one of the easiest parts of the job. It's that initial getting under that tile, initially getting a hole in the tile is the hardest part. Once you can get under the tiles with the hammer and the chisel, this went very quickly, you know, and everything just worked out perfect right along the grout lines here. And now you can see that we've got a lot of debris. We need to clean that out, and then we're going to have some thin set still in the lying on the bottom, and I'm going to show you a technique to get that out. And you can see here what caused the original break. We got a crack in the slab right here, and you can see the tiles cracked right around that crack. So we've got five tiles to replace, and actually right now we've got, this is probably the hardest part of the job, because you really want to get all this thin set out and get down to the cement slab as best as possible. You want it, and then we got to clean the grout channels out real good. And we'll show you some techniques that are real good to do that with this little tool. Okay, now we're ready for the next step. We've got some of the dust and debris cleaned out of our channels here, and the next two steps are to get the grout out from between that is adheres to the side of the tiles, and then also we have the thinset cement, which we have to get out from the bottom that's riding on your substrate there. And one of the techniques that I use first is to wet it down a little bit with just a sponge. And what this will do is it'll give you a good contrast. You'll be able to see where the thinset is and where the substrate is. And that helps a lot. It also helps with the dust in this process. So you're gonna, we got several things that are gonna kick up dust, and this will eliminate some of the very, very light dust, make it a little bit heavier so that that's not flying all over your house. Okay, so we wetted it down there. Now you can see it's very clear. The dark areas are the thin set that we need to remove, and I'll show you a couple of techniques to get that out. And one is simply with the hammer and chisel, and you can take the chisel, get it on the thin set, and hit into it. And it comes out fairly easily, but you can see this will be a very long and tedious process here, which is it'll take a while. This is going to take the longest out of all the jobs here, all the steps. The other thing is this little tool is very useful to get out the grout from between the tiles, and the way you use that, you can scrape along the tiles and get the grout off along the edges. If you can have some stubborn spots, you can push down on it. The shear force on the grout is very low, and so it's easy to just sometimes push off big chunks that way, like that. So you've got to clean that very, very good all around here. Now, probably the best technique for the thin set, though, is to use the oscillating tool, and you get what's called a scraper blade. And that's what this is here. Mine is kind of beat up here, but still works fine. And I'll show you how to use that. First, I need to get on my headphones here to block out the noise. And we're just going to It's a tedious task. You just have to keep working at it, and eventually you'll get it all. It's very important to get that thin set off as much as possible, and also the grout around the edge of the tiles. It's going to be important because when we put on the new tiles, you want it to remain pretty level with the other existing. Okay, well, now we've gotten all the thin set out of the off of the substrate, and we've got all the grout taken out around the sides of the tile, and that was a very lengthy job. That took a couple of hours. Getting the tiles out was easy stuff compared to getting all the thin set out. The next step now is we're going to apply the thin set and then put the tiles in. Now when we do that, the first thing you want to do is you want to check to make sure that we're down far enough with the tiles that the thin set can raise it up a little bit, and make sure the floor is still somewhat level. You're not going to be perfectly level, obviously. And we see that we had a fairly little bit of a crack going right through on the substrate here. This is where Wyatt cracked the tiles. Well, that's living in Texas on a slab home. So we put in all the tiles that we're going to replace here, and we can check to see that it's not a little bit of a rockiness over here. Once we get the thin set in there, there'll be no problem at all. And I also have a handful of these spacers, grout spacers, 1/8 inch grout spacers. And once we get the thin set in there, we are going to put the spacers in here to make sure the tiles stay apart by 1/8 of an inch while the thin set dries. Because during that drying process, the tiles will actually move, and if you don't have these spacers in there, there's a chance that they'll move into each other, and that would be a very big problem. Okay, everything's looking good here. I think the next. Okay, now we've made up our mixture of thin set, and now we're ready to apply it. So we'll spread a little bit out on the first area, and we'll get a little trowel going action here in a second. So now we take our special 1/4 inch trowel, one of these guys, and we start spreading out the thin set. Don't get it real close to the edges, you just want to get in the center where the tile is. And you just keep spreading it out. It's a little awkward, this tool. It's a little bit wider than the actual tile width, so it's a little bit awkward to put it on. Go. It's a little easier when the channel opens up like this here. I just got enough done so that I can get 2 or 3 tiles in, so I'll stop here and put a tile down. Now what I like to do is put a little bit of the thin set on the back of the tile. It's called buttering the tile. Like that, as though you're buttering a piece of bread. And now we're ready to place that first one here. So I place that tile in there, and you want it to be a little bit higher, maybe a 1/16 of an inch higher than the existing tile, because when this thin set dries, it is going to shrink down. Now this is a very difficult part to estimate. It all depends upon what the humidity is, how thick you made your how much water content is in your thin set, so it's really hard to have a good rule of thumb here. But now once I've got that first tile down, I'm going to start inserting my spacers here. We just put the spacers on top here and put 3 or 4 on each side. Like this. And we do it on all edges. The short edges you just need 2. There, now we got all of our spacers in there. Now one thing I like to do is when I place a tile is then to wiggle it a little bit and press it down a little bit and make sure that you know you can feel it grabbing hold of the thin set down there, and that feels pretty good, and then you kind of center it as well. So that's the first tile, and we just keep. Okay, so now we've got all the tiles laid in here, and I'm just finishing up putting the little spacers in there so it can dry up. One of the techniques or tips that I want to give you also is that when we do the grouting, we want to make sure we have a nice clean channel between the tiles. And as we laid down the thin set, we usually have some spots here that we need to clean out. And I usually take a screwdriver and just go down in the grooves there and grab some of that extra thin set there and pull that out of there so that the grout has a good spot to go. And you don't want, this stuff can actually color the grout if it's left up at the top, so you don't want to do that. You don't want to chip it out later, so that's very important to do. Scrape a little bit out, and then make sure you get all your spacers in there. Okay, now we're on to the second to the last step, which is the grouting step. Now we've got the tiles are all nice and they're solid down in there. And the last step is to grout them in. What we use for that, I'm using sanded grout, which has been pre-mixed. You can buy that, it's a little bit more expensive, but in this case I decided to go with that. And I'm using a grout float. This is a rubber-based material here, and you use that to jam the grout into the floor. I've got a putty knife to get the grout out of the container. And before I did that, I used a dental pick-like device to get any remaining cement that was along the edges of the tiles out of there, so it didn't discolor the grout. So here we go. We'll grab some grout, kind of put it on the tiles here, like this. And then we use the float, going at about a 45-degree angle, and we just smash it into the grooves in there. Nice and good. Get all around the tile, all of the grooves, keep working it in. That. This is such a small area, I'm just gonna do the entire area before I stop, and then we'll sponge it off immediately, get all the excess off. Keep pressing it into those grooves real hard. Make sure it gets way down in there. It's a deep groove, about a 1/4 inch, 5/8 of an inch deep, so you want to make sure you get that grout deep down in there. It takes a while to match the grout color because it can be deceiving, because the grout lines are often dirtied from years of dirt, so you got to kind of scrape them and chip them when you're choosing your grout to make sure you get a true, accurate picture of the actual color of your previous grout. And it kind of forces you to clean your grout and the rest of the tile so that you have a good match. When this dries a little bit, you can use water and a sponge and kind of sponge off the excess. Like that. That works. yeah, you can kind of work up a thirst doing that. And just have some water occasionally. It's okay, the grout settled to the bottom. Just kidding, don't ever do that. So we're almost done here. Keep smashing it into the grooves. There we go. Now we're just kind of cleaning up the excess, put it back in the can. There we go. Now we're going to clean off our excesses and just run the sponge lightly over that area. Again, you can push more grout into the grooves this way and also get off all of the excesses. Careful not to get too much water on there. You don't want to dilute the grout too much. But this certainly is a lot easier to get this off now than if you let it dry. It would be almost impossible to get off. Very, very difficult to get off. So the most important thing is you want to get it off of the tile, not necessarily the grout lines. So we're going to wipe that down a little bit more. Maybe every half hour I'll come back and do that again with a sponge. Get it off of the tile so it doesn't stick on the tile. And then final step is going to be we are going to, well, I'm going to have to clean my grout throughout the whole floor here so that it matches. But then we're going to put grout sealer on the grout lines, and that'll attempt to seal the grout so that it'll be easier to clean and protect your